Good morning, Rock Church. We're going to dive into some worship. This next song says, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. So let's proclaim this.
Step out of the shadows, step out of the grave, break into the wild, and don't be afraid. Run into wide open spaces, graces waiting for you. Dance like the weight has been lifted, graces waiting. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom, there is freedom. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom, there is freedom. Come out of the dark, just as you are, into the fullness of His love. Oh, the Spirit is here, let there be freedom, let there be freedom. Bring all the scars. Come back to communion. Come back to start. Run into wide open spaces, graces waiting for you. Dance like the weight has been lifted, graces waiting. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom, there is freedom. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom, there is freedom. Come out of the dark, just as you are, into the fullness of His love. Oh, the Spirit is here, let there be freedom, let there be freedom.
This next part says, chains will fall, prisons shake at the sound of Jesus' name. So you guys sing it loud and let's proclaim this morning.
Chains will fall, prisons shake at the sound of Jesus' name. And lives made whole, hearts awake at the sound of Jesus' name. Chains will fall, prisons shake at the sound of Jesus' name. Lives made whole, hearts awake at the sound of Jesus' name. love for me. Know His love for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Free at last, He has ransomed me. His grace was while I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for. Yes, He died for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for
Is there a better name to be called than a child of God? Come on, come on. Guys, let's continue right along in worship. I want to read some scripture to you. It comes from Psalm 28. And for the last 3 weeks, and guys, you haven't been here the last 3 weeks. Maybe you have. Awesome if you have. But if you haven't, you don't know. But I've been pushing our people. I don't know if you guys have noticed or not, but pushing you into a deeper level of worship. More free, I should say, in worship. And kind of explaining why we do what we do in worship. And these verses kind of lay that out a little bit. So one of the things is sometimes we just raise a hand. You know, that could be a declaration. But in dealing with these verses, like verse 2 says, listen to my prayer for mercy as I cry out to you for help, as I lift my hands towards your holy sanctuary. So I want you to think about, you know, if you were drowning and you saw somebody close to you, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to reach out for them. Hey, help. I need help. I'm drowning. Save me. It's the same. That's what we're doing in worship. We're saying, God, I need your help. I'm drowning. Or maybe you just want to praise him. Say, I'm so thankful for everything that you're doing, everything that you did for me. How you took me out of that hole I was in last week. Praise you for that. And verse 7 says, the Lord is my strength and shield. I trust in him with all my heart. He helps me, and my heart is filled with joy. I burst out in songs of thanksgiving. So I don't know about you, but if you've had those moments where God stepped in and he's helped you out, and clearly it was him, you can't help but to burst out in thanksgiving to him. You say, God, I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful. So I'm challenging you today. Just like a little kid comes to his dad with arms saying, Dad, I love you. He's our creator. He's our dad. Let's come to him this morning, today, right now in this moment, this next song, as we sing together. Saying, I praise you and I need you. I know it might be weird. It's all right. It's dark in here. Nobody can see you. Let's just praise him today in this place. All right, we ready? All right, let's do it. Darkness runs for justice roll on like a river. Come on, sing. Let worship turn into revival. Lord, lead us back to you. So come, move, let justice roll on like a river. Let worship. One more time, everything you got, here we go. So come, move, let justice roll on like a river. Let worship turn into revival. Lord, lead us back to you. Amen. You guys pray with me. Lord, lead us back to you, King of all generations. So good to us. Father, I pray that what we have, that we don't keep to ourselves. That we won't keep it for this room or this day, but we'll take it with us. We know that you're with us wherever we go. And Father, I pray that people will see us as different. Not because of anything that we're doing, but because of who we're following. Father, I pray that you continue to move through this place, move through hearts, take down walls that have been built up, and reveal yourself to somebody today. Let them meet you for the first time. Know the joy that only you can give. We praise your name, and we're so thankful. It's in your mighty name we pray, Jesus. Amen. Amen. You guys can take a seat.
Well, hello, Rock Church. How's everybody doing? Good? Good. It's good to see you guys today. It's great being with you. If you happen to be new with us, my name is Josh. I'm one of the pastors here, and just excited about being together, right? We're here, we're online, we're at C3 Coffee Bar, we're watching on demand. Give it up for everybody who's watching from any of our campuses today. Yeah. And man, it's a great time of year because it's August, and August means we get football, right? Isn't that good? So let's give it up for all these guys from Coastal Carolina that are with us today. So good to have you guys. So thankful. But it is a great time of year. Thursday night, I got done with church and went home and watched the NFL. So that was great. Then Friday, these guys started camp. High school started camp. I was able to be out at a high school practice yesterday. So I love the fact that we got football right here in our midst, and it's that time of year. And as we're talking about football, I want us to kind of talk about the greatest sports movie ever, all right? We've been in this series, if you've been with us, called At the Movies, and each week we've been hitting kind of a different movie, and today we're going to talk about the greatest sports movie, or at least one of them. And we threw this out as a poll to anybody who's got our Rock app. We asked this week the greatest one, and so I'm kind of curious where we land, all right? Like some people, like really, really smart people in the crowd said that Rudy was the best sports movie of all time. Okay. The people clapping really love me right now. Thank you, okay? You got to remember, I'm an Indiana boy, so that's the homeland and all that. But then a lot of others came up, like The Replacements came up. I was a little surprised by that one, all right? We Are Marshall came up. That was a great one. 42 came up. Sandlot came up. A bunch of them. But then the biggest, like the two that came in the poll the most was The Blind Side and Remember the Titans, all right? So I want to put it to a little poll in the crowd, all right? If you were just voting on those two movies, how many of y'all would say The Blind Side is the best? Go ahead and raise your hand if you think it's The Blind Side, all right? How many of y'all think it's Remember the Titans? Yeah, like it's there, dude, it's there. And the same thing, it holds true live as it did in the internet poll because it was like a landslide, Remember the Titans, all right? And it told me a couple things, all right? One, it told me that we really like football movies, all right? Because almost every movie, or I shouldn't say almost, the majority of them were all football. There were a couple basketball movies mentioned. One of them was the movie Hoosiers. If you've ever seen that, great flick. But then the one mentioned most often was Space Jam, all right? Who here has seen Space Jam? Anybody? Yeah, an old classic, all right? Not the best sports movie of all time, but definitely the best cartoon/sports movie of all time. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Space Jam a little bit today as we're talking about greatness. But inside of that, it brings another debate today, all right? And I know this is going to like really bring some people, you're going to be talking the rest of the service, is because Space Jam's coming out again next year. And next year it's coming out, and LeBron is going to star in it. So now the question is, who's the greatest, MJ or LeBron, right? How many LeBron fans? LeBron? All right. What about MJ? That's a Carolina girl right there saying that. So a big debate. And so then it just comes down to, well, how do you measure greatness? Right? I mean, because if you're talking MJ, there's certain things you would look at from MJ's record. If you're looking at LeBron, there's certain things you can look at that way. So how do you measure greatness? So that's what I want us to really dive into. And I think there's a way to measure greatness and be great. And this is what I know. We all want to be great. We all want to be great in the areas of our life. And what I mean by that is when it comes to your marriage, you want to have a great marriage. When it comes to your job, you want to have a great job. When it comes to football, you want to be great at football. When it comes to other sports, you want to be great at those sports. When it comes to your academics, you want to be great when it comes to academics. And in all areas, parenthood, I want to be a great parent. When it comes to my faith walk, I want to be great. So if we want to be great in all those different avenues, we got to figure out the secret of greatness. And Bugs Bunny, he had an idea. In the Space Jam movie, he had an idea of what greatness looked like. Let's just see what greatness was for Bugs Bunny. All right, check out the screen.
I didn't get dragged down here just to get my butt whipped by a bunch of ugly monsters. I ain't going out like that. We're letting them push us around. We gotta fight them back. We gotta take it to them. We gotta get right in their faces. And what do you say? Are you with me or not?
Finished? Great speech and all, Doc. You had him riveted. But didn't you forget something?
What?
Your secret stuff. Wow. Whoa. Nice deltoid. Play along. Stop hogging it, Mike. We're your teammates. Secret stuff. Secret stuff?
You wouldn't hold out on us, would you?
No, I mean, I didn't think you guys really needed it. I mean, you're so tough. You're competitive.
We're also chicken tough. We need it bad.
Hey! I'd like some of that.
You know, this goes against everything they taught me in health class.
You want to win or not?
Bottoms up. Yummy.
All right. How about we go out and kick some alien butt, huh? Let's go. How about it? All right, ready?
So do you want to win? Do you want to be great, right? And I think, again, most of us want that. That's what we want. And Bugs Bunny, he had this idea of greatness was just this make-believe sauce, this make-believe stuff from Michael Jordan, all right? And that's a cartoon. That's not real. Yet, Jesus, when he was on earth, he said, he had a conversation with some guys, and he said, let me tell you how to be great. And what I love is now we have the secret of greatness. And what Jesus said, if you want to be great, you got to be different. That's really all Jesus said. Is he said, if you want to be great, you've got to be different. And there's a difference in how to find greatness. And then he went on to say, the way you find greatness, the way that you're great, is you be different by being willing to serve others. And if we will learn the attitude of service, if we'll learn what it means to truly serve and sacrifice, then we can truly pick up greatness. Martin Luther King Jr., he said it this way. He said, everybody can be great because everybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and your verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. The way Jesus said it is he said, be different by serving. And he said it in a crowd of guys who were arguing about greatness. Let's pick it up. It's a story that's found in the book of Luke. And Luke is a biography written about Jesus. And this guy named Luke, he basically took the stories of Jesus, took the encounters of Jesus, and he put them down. And we still have them today. And this is what he said. It says, then they, and the they means the apostles. It means the 12 guys who were following Jesus at the time, who were hanging out with him and had been hanging out with him for 3.5 years. It says, and then they began to argue among themselves who would be the greatest. All right? Now, for guys, we understand that argument because we have that argument all the time. If we're talking about Madden, if we're talking about games, if we're talking about many things in life, we argue about who's the greatest. So they were arguing, well, who's the greatest among us? And Jesus told them, in this world, the kings and great men lord it over their people, yet they are called friends of the people. What he meant by that is he says that kings and lords and people who are in charge, people who are in authority, that they lord it, that they act like a boss, they demand respect, yet still the people underneath them call them a friend, all right? And so he's saying to them, I don't want you to be like them. He goes on and he says this, but among you, it will be different. It'll be different. Now, guys, I got to pause before I go on to the rest of the text, and I got to explain that. Like, why is Jesus making such a big deal about this? And the reason why is because he knows later that night he is going to be arrested. The next day, he knows he's going to be crucified and die on the cross. That he's going to rise from the dead, he's going to come back, and he's going to show himself, but he's only going to show himself to the people for 40 days after that. And then he's going to ascend up to heaven. And everything he's done in his life, the 33 years he's lived on this planet, he is basically at that point saying, I'm done, I'm gone, I'm leaving it into your hands. And he's looking at these 12 men who have been standing beside him for 3.5 years. And he's saying, when I leave, you're going to be in charge. When I'm no longer on this earth in a physical way, then you're going to be in charge. And what I don't want you to think is that as being in charge of the church and growing the church, I don't want you to think of it as this position of lordship, this position of authority, this position where you make everybody underneath you do exactly what you tell them to do. He's saying, I want you to recognize that if you're going to be sitting in a position of authority, that the way that you live that position of authority is through an act of service. And that's why he continues on. He says, it's going to be different. It has to be different. Those who are the greatest among you should take the lowest rank. And the leader should be like the servant. Those of you who have the greatest rank should put yourself at the bottom of the totem pole. It's the restaurant owner going to the kitchen and washing the dishes. It's the principal of the school taking out the garbage. It's the person in charge doing the smallest of tasks because they're saying that everybody has to get this stuff done, that it has to be done, so I'm not above the need to get it done, so they're willing to do it. Jesus is saying, those who are greatest among you should take the lowest rank, and the leader should be like the servant. Then he continues on. Who is more important, the one who sits at the table or the one who serves? Well, the one who sits at the table, of course. Now, again, I want you to think about this in the context of when it would have been happening, all right? That Jesus would have been sitting at a table with the other apostles. And as they're sitting around, he would have been saying, who is the greatest? Those of us who are sitting at the table or those of us who are serving? And everybody in that culture at that time would have said, well, it's those who have a seat at the table. Because if you don't have a seat at the table, it means that you're serving, that you're not invited to the table yet, stuff of that nature. All right? So everybody would go, yeah, that makes sense. But Jesus says this, but not here, for I am among you as one who serves. All the eyes are on Jesus in this moment. He's speaking. He's teaching them. And they're all looking at him going, oh, we were arguing about who's the greatest. We shouldn't have been doing that. He's the greatest. And he says, you know what? I am here not as someone trying to be the greatest. I'm here as the one who's trying to serve. And then if you'll notice the posture in the text, he gets up, all right? If you go to another biography of Jesus, it's called the Gospel of John, it gives this story in a little bit more detail. It says that he got up from the table, he went, and he grabbed a towel. And when he grabbed the towel, he then went to the other apostles that were sitting around the table. He grabbed a wash basin and a towel, and he started to wash their feet. All right? Now, all the guys in the room would have immediately said, what is he doing? He is the leader. He is in charge. He shouldn't be washing our feet. All right? But what he was trying to do is to show them that I am willing to serve. All right? Now, washing feet is not something that we do today. It's not something that is very, very normal for us in our practice today. But back then, it was very normal, all right? Because they would have had a lot of dirty feet, and when they'd come into a house, they would wash their feet before they'd go about the meal, and they'd go about the rest of the night, all right? Today, the way we do that is we walk into somebody's house, and we say, should I take my shoes off? You know what I mean? Like we're basically saying, I don't want to get the house dirty. Back then, they would wash the feet, but it wouldn't be the owner of the house. It wouldn't be the person who was the teacher. It would be a servant or something would come in and they would wash. But what Jesus does is he picks up the towel and he goes to those guys and he starts washing the feet. He washes the feet of his friends. He washes the feet of those that he loves. He washes the feet of the guy who doesn't want to be washed, meaning this, he serves the one who doesn't want to be served. There's a guy in the crowd, his name was Peter, and Peter said, no, Jesus, don't wash my feet. I'm not worthy. You shouldn't do this. And Jesus said, hey, if I don't wash your feet, you have no part of me. And Peter's like, well, give me a whole bath then, okay? What Peter was doing at the beginning, though, is like, no, I don't want to be served. But Jesus said, doesn't matter. I'm going to serve you. Then he went on to another guy named Judas, all right? And nobody else in the crowd knew this at that point, but Jesus knew. Jesus knew that Judas that very night was going to betray him, and that he was going to die on a cross because of Judas. Yet Jesus still went and washed his feet as well. He went to the person that would have been difficult to love and washed his feet and served him. He went to the person that didn't love him and served him. And I think we see a great example here on how to serve. You serve those that come into your proximity, that you serve those who are around you. You serve those that you love. You serve those who you teach, who you lead. You serve those who don't want to be served, and you serve those who don't like you. You serve everybody in the crowd. And when we serve, we get better. When we serve, your marriage gets better. When you serve, your team gets better. When you serve, the place of your employment gets better. When you serve, your school gets better. When we serve, great things happen. But I got to say this. Service isn't easy. Service isn't easy. Because to truly serve means that you have to be willing to sacrifice. When we serve without sacrifice, what we're actually doing is serving our own needs. Let me go down this road a little bit, all right? And this might hurt a little bit. But when we serve without sacrifice, what we're really doing is serving to check a box. What we're really doing is serving to maybe make a relationship better, and you're trying to earn some brownie points, and you're trying to get better. When we serve without sacrifice, what we actually do is we serve so that we will feel better about ourselves. But when we serve to the point of sacrifice, then great things can happen. When we serve to the point of sacrifice, then a difference is made. But to do that, you got to take a risk. To do that, you got to gamble, all right? And it won't always turn out exactly the way that you thought it'd turn out. But you have to be willing to do it because it's worth the risk. Let's go back to Space Jam for just a second, all right? If you don't know the movie, let me tell you a little bit of the storyline. That inside of it, what had happened is there was this alien planet, and they took over the talents of some of the NBA stars back then. Patrick Ewing, some of the guys like that. And they took the powers over, gave them to these little Martians, these little aliens, and they became what was called Monstars. And then the Monstars were taken on in a basketball game, was taking on the characters from Toontown. Well, they captured Michael. They asked Michael to come along and to serve alongside, and Michael said no problem, and he played the game. But in about the middle of the game, Michael understands, he comes to learn that these aliens have stolen the powers of these current NBA stars. And he's like, I got to get their powers back. I got to take care of my friends. I got to help them out. I got to serve them, all right? So what Michael Jordan does is he goes and he makes a huge bet. I know that's hard to believe that Michael Jordan would make a huge bet, all right? Come on, that was funny. If you don't get it, go Google it and you'll understand. But anyway, so Michael Jordan makes a huge bet, and he goes to this alien leader, and he says, here's what's going to happen. We're going to play, and if we win, then you give my NBA friends their powers back. And the guy says, no problem, but if you lose, then you got to play, you got to come to my planet and play for me and serve me. So Michael makes the bet, and we know the end of the story. But here's what I want us to picture. That Michael was willing to make a sacrifice. He was willing to bet on it, and he was willing to serve and sacrifice. But again, that's make-believe. It's a cartoon. It's a cartoon. But there's a story that's not a cartoon. There's a story that's not a make-believe story. It's a story about Jesus, who was, if you want to call it, on a different planet. He was in heaven. And he said, I'm willing to serve people. But I'm not willing just to serve them. I'm willing to serve them to the point of sacrifice. And he left heaven and came to this earth. And he gave up his life. He fully surrendered because he didn't just wash the feet. He didn't just use the towel. He also used his life, and he sacrificed everything so that we could be brought back into a relationship with him. And I want you to think about this for a second. It wasn't a sure bet, right? Like what he was doing was a sure bet. He knew the plan of God, and what he was doing was a sure bet for him, but he didn't know if it was a sure bet that we would surrender our lives to him. Because what he did is he went to the cross, he died on the cross, he rose from the dead, and then he ascended up in heaven, and he said, now come follow me. But he left that choice up to us, and he draws us in, and he comes after us through the Holy Spirit, and he's wanting a relationship with you. He's wanting a relationship with me, but it comes down to a decision. Will we cross the line and do it? So he did all that without a sure bet of whether or not you were going to respond to him. He was willing to make a sacrifice. That's the reason it says in Mark, for even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many. You see, that night that he's getting ready to be betrayed, he talked about this sacrifice. And this is what he said. He said he took some bread and gave thanks to God for it. Then he broke it into pieces and gave it to the disciples, saying, this is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. After supper, he took another cup of wine and said, this is the cup of the new covenant between God and his people, an agreement confirmed with my blood, which is poured out as a sacrifice for you. Make sure you catch that word. See that word. That is poured out as a sacrifice. That he said, I'm willing to give it all up in hopes that we will all respond to his message. That he was willing to lay it on the lines. That night he sat with his disciples and he shared a meal with them, which was a very familiar meal with them, but he was basically saying, listen, I'm getting ready to leave. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you this bread, and I'm going to give you this wine, this juice, and I want you to now forever remember my body and my blood, which is broken for you. What he's saying is, I'm making a bet that you're not going to forget me. Because when I die and I ascend to heaven, I'm leaving it all into your hands. So I don't want you to forget. What I want you to do is I want you to go out and I want you to serve to the point of sacrifice so that people can hear the gospel message. And that's the challenge I want to give to us. But as I have to say, there's not necessarily a guarantee that it's going to be easy or it's going to go the way you want it to. I think about a missionary couple that did mission work back in the 1920s. Their name was David and Savi Flood. They were from Scandinavia, and they left Scandinavia and went to Africa, and they trained at a mission complex in Africa, and then they went out into the Congo. And they went to a place where no one had ever went with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And they went to this village, and when they got to the village, they tried to move into the village, but the chief there was like, nope, we don't want you. So they set up shop, kind of set up their house just a little bit up the mountain. And the only interaction they had with all these people, there was about 600 of these people in this little village. The only interaction they had with them was a little boy who the chief allowed to once or twice a week deliver chickens or eggs to them so that they could eat. That was it. So Savi Flood said, well, if this is the only interaction that I can have, then I'm going to do everything I can to serve this young little boy who's bringing me food. And so she served him, and she learned the language, and they talked, and she eventually shared Christ with him, and this young boy surrendered his life to Christ. While they were there, though, she ended up catching malaria a couple times. Then she also became pregnant, and when she gave birth, the birth was too difficult because of her weakness due to the malaria, and she eventually died just a few days after birth. And her husband, his name was David, at this point, he's angry. He's mad, and he's like, it's over. And he starts yelling and cussing at God, saying, God, I've done everything. I came here to serve these people. I've sacrificed my life. My wife has died, and you haven't shown up. You haven't done anything. You haven't even allowed us to make a dent eternally with this group of people. So he was gone. He buried his wife in a crude grave, put a cross up that said Savi Flood, and then left. He went back to the mission compound, handed over his brand new daughter, whose name was Aggie, and then went back to Scandinavia. Never to see her again during his adult years or her child years. Well, Aggie was there with a missionary couple from America. They eventually brought her to America. She was raised here, went to Bible college, married a guy who ended up becoming a president of a Bible college in Seattle. And one time they were in Seattle, and she went out to her mailbox, and she pulled a magazine out of her mailbox. And it was all in Scandinavian language. She couldn't understand any of it, but she was flipping through it going, why did I get this? And as she's flipping through the magazine, all of a sudden she sees a picture of a crude white cross on a grave. And it said, Severe Flood. Now, Aggie knew her parents' story. She hadn't met him, but she knew the names David and Severe Flood. So she's like, this has got to be my mom. What's going on? So she went to the Bible college, found somebody who spoke the language, and said, tell me what this article says. And the professor said, well, the article talks about some missionaries named David and Severe Flood. She goes, that's my mom and dad. And then the missionary went through, the professor went through and said, well, the story is about a little boy who came to Christ, who grew up in the village, who ended up planting a school in the village. And at the school, he was able to help all the kids in the school come to Christ. And then all of the kids in the school went home and won all their parents to Christ, even the chief. So now everybody in this little village in Africa now are followers of Christ because of David and Severe Flood. So Aggie's sitting there going, wow, that's my parents. That's it. And she's like, I got to meet my dad. I got to find my dad. So she does the research, finds out he's still in Scandinavia, finds out that he's on his deathbed due to alcoholism. So she goes over there, and she meets some half-brothers and sisters who, because he had remarried. And they embraced and did all that, and she got ready to go in and see her dad. And they said, whatever you do when you go in, don't mention the name of God, because he still hates God. So Aggie went in, and she started talking to her dad and introduced herself, and he ended up understanding who she was, and they embraced, and he was like, I'm sorry. I never should have done this. And Aggie said, it's okay, Papa. God had a plan, and it's all been worked out. And immediately he quit crying. His face became stiff, and he's like, don't mention the name of God. God has taken everything from me. I don't want to hear about God. I sacrificed for him. I served for him for nothing. And she goes, oh, Dad, you haven't heard. And she pulled out the magazine, and she told him all about the story, about the little boy who he and his wife had won to Christ and how it had changed an entire village. And immediately he started sobbing again, and he repented. And he said, I didn't think we did anything. I thought I served and I sacrificed for nothing. And guys, oftentimes that's where we'll land. We'll start serving and we'll start sacrificing, and it will cost you. If we think the sacrifice doesn't cost, then it's not sacrifice. And we don't always understand where it's going to lead, but that's when we've got to trust God, because God can show up. But the whole idea of serving and sacrificing is the idea of saying, I'll pick up the towel and I'll put myself down, and whatever God wants to do through it, then I'm going to trust that he's got great things in store. And that's exactly what happened with David and Severe Flood. The crazy thing is it wasn't only 600 people that came to Christ. You see, as a few years later, Aggie was at a missionary conference, and different missionaries were just getting up and talking about different countries where God was working. And a guy got up from the country of Zaire, if I say it right. And he started talking about the 110,000 followers of Christ who are now part of that country. When he got done, Aggie went up and talked to him and said, that sounds like the area where my mom and dad are from, or went to do mission work. Have you ever heard of Severe Flood? And he's like, Severe Flood? How do you know Severe Flood? She goes, it's my mom and my dad. And he goes, I was the little boy who your mom and dad brought to Christ. I was the little boy. And he then followed it up by saying this, I want you to know that your mom is the greatest person in the history of our country. How do you be great? You serve and you sacrifice. You want to be different? Well, then make a difference through serving and sacrificing. And that's how you become great. And with that in mind, I want us to move into a time of response. And I want us to really think about this for a second. That if you want to be great, you got to be different. And difference is seen through service and sacrifice. And when you're willing to be different, what you do is you make a difference in others and then also in yourself. And that's what I want to challenge us to do today. And I'm going to make it extremely practical. I'm going to make it extremely easy, tangible for us to grab a hold of something today. I want you to think about picking up a towel and serving and sacrificing. And I'm going to tell you where to do it. First, do it in your house. Just do it in your house. Whether your house is a dormitory, an apartment, wherever your house is. Whether your roommates are your mom and your dad and your siblings, or whether your roommates are classmates or teammates, pick up the towel right there and start serving. Start serving your spouse. Start serving your parents. Start serving those who you live with. And I don't have to tell you exactly how. You know how. You know what's going on in the house. You know what issues are happening there. And say, how do I pick up a towel and serve and sacrifice right there in that spot? And then I also want you to think about where you work. Another way to say work is where you go to school. I want you to think about where you work and where you go to school. And think about, how do I serve? How do I sacrifice at my place of employment? Who is it that I need to come alongside of and wash their feet? Because you know they're going through a hard time. Or maybe you know that they don't want to be served, or they don't even like you, and think, well, I'm going to change that narrative. I'm going to start serving them. Think about the people you go to school with. For you guys, think about the guys you play with, the guys who are next to you on the line of scrimmage or in the backfield. And think about, man, how do I pick up a towel? How do I serve them? How do I sacrifice for them? You want to be great? Serve and sacrifice. I want you to go a step further. I want you to think about where you worship. Because it's where you live, it's where you work, where you play, it's where you worship. That I want us to think about right here at church. How can you pick up the towel? Because, guys, it's easy to come into church. It's easy to come in and to listen to some teaching. It's easy to get involved in worship and to enjoy the emotions. But again, if that's all we do, then that's really still about us. But what would happen if we'd pick up the towel and we really start serving and sacrificing? And there's hundreds of ways to serve inside the church. Running the camera, using your creative energy, your artistic energy, thinking about serving in the lobby or in the parking lot, serving on the coffee team, serving in our This Gen ministries. Tons of ways. Think about your gifts and think, how do I pick up a towel? And how do I sacrifice? And you might say, well, I don't have time. Sacrifice. Well, I'll serve once every 6 weeks. No, sacrifice and make the allotment and start serving. But again, it's not just about inside the walls. We got to get out. And now let's think, how do you serve in your community? This time of year is a real easy way. It's August, which means there's thousands of kids who are getting ready to head back to school. And a bunch of those kids are going to go out with their mom and their dad, and they're going to go to Target or Walmart or wherever, and they're going to do some school shopping. And they're going to get new tennis shoes. They're going to get a new backpack. They're going to get new socks. They're going to get new underwear. But there's also hundreds, maybe thousands of kids who are going to go to school this year wearing the same old socks, wearing the same old underwear, wearing the same old tennis shoes with a raggedy backpack. And man, we can make a difference. We can make a difference right now. I'll speak to those of us on the Conway campus right now as you're leaving today. That just right in between the two doors, we've got 3 buckets set up that has postcards on top of each bucket of a way you can serve. We've talked to some administrators at some of our local schools, and we said, how can we best serve you? What does your school, what do your students need? And at Waccamaw Elementary, the administrators there said, we need backpacks with school supplies. That we're going to have some kids that are going to come to school this year that aren't going to have any supplies. So here's what I want you to do. As you're leaving, maybe grab that card. Just grab that one card, all right? And decide to go to Target or Walmart and go buy a backpack, all right? Now, don't buy a cheap backpack. Don't buy a $5 piece of crap. Excuse my language, but am I right? You buy something that a kid can use for a long time. You buy something that a kid is proud of, okay? You go and you fill it with supplies. And you bring it back. You got 7 days, all right? 7 days. We ain't waiting you do it now, all right? Maybe what you do is you grab one of the other schools, all right? South Conway. We talked to their administrators. They said, we just need some school supplies. And you pick up that card, and it's very specific. They have some very specific needs. And you can go to the store and you can buy those and you bring them back next weekend. Or Homewood Elementary. They said, we need hygiene products. We need socks. We need underwear. We need toothpaste. We need toothbrushes. We need deodorant for the kids that need some of that. Maybe that's what you can do. Or maybe here's something else you can do. Maybe your kid doesn't go to one of those schools, or maybe your kid goes to a different school. Well, then just go, and when you're school shopping for your kid and you're buying him a backpack or her a backpack and the school supplies, just buy 2 of everything and fill another backpack. And then when you go to school and you go to open house and you turn in your child stuff, look at the teacher and say, here's a backpack for a child in need, all right? My guess is we have some teachers or administrators in the room right now. If you're a teacher or administrator, just raise your hand right now, all right? So I know that there's some over here, some over here. Yeah, and I'm proud of you. But here's the reason I have them do that. You know which kid needs something in your classroom. So if a parent shows up and says, give this to the kid in need, you know exactly what they need. You know the kid that needs it, and you know exactly what's going on in their life. All right? So just do that. Maybe buy a brand new pair of shoes, all right? And I know shoes are expensive, but when you buy one for your child, buy one for another child, hand that to the teacher, and let the teacher serve that child who's in the greatest need. We have ways we can serve today. What will it take? Picking up the towel. It'll cost, but pick up the towel, serve and sacrifice. The last thing I'll say is maybe what we've got to do today is before we pick up the towel to serve somebody, maybe you need to pick up the towel and you need to wave it. Kind of like a flag of surrender to Jesus Christ. You can serve Jesus without surrendering to Jesus. But what I want to challenge you to do is surrender to Jesus. I want to challenge you to say, Jesus, I want to serve you. That I want to surrender my life, that I want to wave the white flag, and I want to give you my life right now, and I want to start serving you with every aspect of my life. And if that's you, today, you can do that by saying a prayer of saying, Jesus, please forgive me. But don't keep that prayer private. As we always say around here, go public. Stop by the Connect Corner and say, hey, I need to talk to somebody about the prayer I said today. Do me a favor, let's stand up. We're going to go in this time of response. And the way we do this here at The Rock, if you're new with us, is there's communion up front. If you want to come up and take communion, you can do that. You can remember what Jesus did for us on the cross when he sacrificed his life. That you can take communion and say, thank you for this bread and for this juice and for everything you did for me. Maybe what you need to do is you need to think about one of those areas of your life and say, this is where I'm going to pick up the towel. Whatever it is that you need to do, let's spend some time and let's do that. Pray with me. Jesus, let's pray right now that you would help us to pick up the towel, to serve and to sacrifice, so that our marriages can be great, so that our schools can be great, so that our church can be great, so our community can be great, so our relationships can be great, so everything can be great. Not so that we necessarily are remembered as great, but so those environments and those places where we live and work and play are great. And not for our name's sake, Jesus, but for yours. So that you can be great in those places. Jesus, help us to do that right now. In your name, amen. Let's spend some time responding.
and holy. There is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around and show